Good morning, good morning, good morning. Buenos dias, mi gente. Yo. Welcome to Daily Discipline number 320. My name's Rob Hoback. Happy that you're here. Honored and humbled that you keep coming back like for reals. Thank you. It's a Sunday fun day. It is the first day of September, and it's a work day. We got things to do, so let's go. First things first, still the realist. I am also not surprised. Yeah. So I told you guys I've been reading this book about intuition and connections and just all of the things that we can't explain. And for those of you who know me well, you've heard my stories about, being on planes and meeting people and stuff like this. And so at the last minute, I was asked to come to a 60th birthday party. I came, and last night it happened again where I'm chatting with somebody that I just barely met, and within like a minute, I found a very strong connection to them, to the point that some people that were there for the whole thing, they were like, "Oh my God, that just gave me the chills." But like, yeah, I'm not even surprised anymore. It's just awesome. So there are things that connect all of us that it's just odd. It's not odd. It's just unexplained, right? So anyway, yeah, no longer surprised. All right. So number one. Check this out. I don't know if you guys noticed the date, 9/1/19. Huh? That's kind of fun. And it's episode number 320. So yesterday, after I did my video, I just Googled 320. I was like, well, what is that number? Is there any significance to that? And I believe it's the zip code or an area code up in Montana. But the first thing that popped up was a website it was about mental health in Montana, based there, and it was a combination of music and nature and all of these things. And it had a lot to do with Chester Bennington from Lincoln Park. Like his widow was very involved in it. So I spent some time looking at it. It was talking about just changing the narrative. And so, back around 4th of July, I posted a video about controlling the narrative. But sometimes instead of, taking control of it and saying, hey, look, I'm going to control sometimes we need to change the narrative. And I think mental illness and opioids are two things that we have to get in front of. So I just wrote some notes down here. So just bear with me for just a minute as I go through this. But, like a drug addiction or mental illness are things that a lot of people just don't want to talk about. They never even want to have the conversation like, hey, I feel like something's different here. Let's talk about this. And so, I wonder well, why is that? So you think about, most people haven't had to deal with something like this. So think about alcoholism or gambling or any other addiction. There's generally, it's easier to spot, and it takes a longer time for it to crescendo, to come to the point where it's really, really a problem. So people didn't like alcoholism and stuff, like people just didn't talk about it, right? You just let somebody kind of do that, to just let them do their thing. And then we had, like in the 80s and 90s, we started having there was a crack epidemic. And if we're honest, most people it didn't affect most of us. That was inner city black people, right? Poor black people, didn't have anything to do with the rest of the men. So we didn't talk about it, didn't have to, right? Unless you were in it. And then so for the masses, right? And then, you have meth that becomes a problem. And that was a problem in rural, poor, white areas, right? Again, so for the masses, this wasn't an issue. But mental illness and opioids, that affects everybody. The news came out the other day about Tyler Skaggs, the baseball player that we talked about, where the A's had that incredible night where they honored him. And I think that a lot of those guys knew that this was going to come out too. If they were to be truthful, they knew something was up, and maybe they'd gone and talked to him. We'll never know the truth. But my point is this, right? Like, these are things that are taking so many people so young, and it's all preventable. And as somebody who has been surrounded by mental illness, right? Like I struggle with some of these things myself. And still the way people will address it and say things, it's hurtful, but it's better than the alternative, right? And so this is how it starts, right? Us just having a conversation about it. If we're struggling with one of those things, we have to be able to raise our hand without fear of judgment and saying, I need help. So with that, I'm just going to remind us that, we're better together. We are, right? I love the community that we have here. Um, my heart goes out to, Southern Florida's about ready to get hit by a pretty nasty hurricane. That's going to be an issue for a lot of people. And so often we see the best of humanity, but I would argue we need to be like that every day. Let's not wait for a tragedy or a natural disaster. All right. Hands up, peace out. We're better together. I appreciate you guys stopping by. Obviously, I'm on the road. I'll be back in Oklahoma tonight. Be back here tomorrow morning for our daily discipline on a manic Monday. Deuces.